Imagine a world much like today, where on the break of a long winter, you arise to see the sun shining on lush green vegetation, monarchs and bees fluttering about, flowers blooming and trees blossoming. All the while, the sound of a bird's song is carried by a warm breeze. Now, imagine a world where just as the frost breaks and the earth begins to awaken again, there are no birds to sing, no bees to pollinate, no flowers to bloom, and wildlife has fallen ill, a silent spring. What if I told you that the possibility of this hushed world was nearly our reality without the help of the profound, intelligent, not so silent Rachel Carson, a pioneer environmentalist?
If we are ever to solve the basic problem of environmental contamination, we must begin to count the many hidden costs of what we are doing.
Hello, my name is Haley Bates, and today I'll be sharing with you the life and times of Rachel Carson, a woman who dedicated her life to preserving the health of the environment and all living beings through educating the public and calling for new protective policies surrounding the use of detrimental chemicals and pesticides. Rachel Carson was born on her family's 64-acre farm in Springdale, Pennsylvania, to Robert and Maria McLean Carson. As Rachel and her two older siblings, Marion and Robert, grew up, they spent most of their time exploring and learning about their vast homestead's flora and fauna. Rachel became enchanted by the natural world around her, and with the influence of her mother, who had a lifelong passion for nature, she developed a drive to preserve the beauty that she grew to admire. Rachel also had a love for literature and began writing stories at the age of 8. Her first story, inspired by her brother who fought in the Army Air Service, was published in St. Nicholas, a popular children's magazine, at age 11. This was just the beginning of Rachel's distinguished writing career. In order to reach her full potential, Rachel's mother sent her to Parnassus High School, as they were known for their esteemed reputation for excellent teachers. She graduated at the top of her class in May 1925. Later that year, Rachel enrolled at Pennsylvania College for Women in Pittsburgh, now known as Chatham University, to major in English with the intention of becoming a professional writer. Rachel was so dedicated to her studies that amidst financial troubles, a benefactor recognized her notable efforts and granted her the remaining funds for tuition so that she could continue to have a proper education. Inevitably, Rachel's love for the natural world triumphed over her plan to focus solely on writing, so she began to study biological sciences. 4 years later, Rachel graduated with her bachelor's degree in biology with great honors. She continued her studies that fall at the acclaimed Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore, Maryland, where she would later graduate with a master's degree in zoology in 1932. Rachel's plan to earn a PhD, however, came to a halt when her parents could no longer afford to support her financially. From there, Rachel began writing radio scripts for the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries' weekly educational broadcast, Romance Under the Waters, which was an excellent opportunity for Rachel to display her passion for wildlife and writing. The Bureau requested that she sit in on the civil service exam, which resulted in Rachel becoming a junior aquatic biologist in 1936. Her dedication and outstanding work within the U.S. Bureau of Fisheries landed her the position of editor-in-chief of all publications in 1949. In the midst of her successful professional career, working for the federal government, Rachel craved to reach the public on a new level. She published a total of 4 books, most notably and best-selling Silent Spring, released in 1962. This book focused on chemical pesticides and the detrimental effects they imposed upon the environment and all of Earth's inhabitants. It began with a tale of a fictitious town plagued with an unknown illness that spreads to all life, leaving birds and bees to disappear, trees unable to bear fruit, vegetation to die, and rivers to be left lifeless, thus a silent spring. Rachel called on the public, agricultural scientists, and the government to change the way humankind viewed the natural world by pointing out man's war against Earth. At the time, this was one of the most controversial texts and chemical companies sought out to discredit her as a communist or hysterical because she accused the chemical industry of blatantly spreading misinformation and public officials for accepting these industry claims discerningly. There were many radical attempts to shame her, and it was even claimed that her extreme rhetoric generated a culture of fear. Many companies pulled their ads from the CBS Reports TV special on April 3, 1963, titled The Silent Spring of Rachel Carson. Roughly 15 million viewers tuned in, and nevertheless, Rachel prevailed. President John F. Kennedy's Science Advisory Committee report even validated her research and claimed pesticides were a major public issue. Carson received medals from the National Audubon Society and the American Geographical Society, along with an induction into the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Rachel never backed down from spreading this crucial message, even amidst the resistance. In Silent Spring, she stated, "A who's who of pesticides is therefore of concern to us all. If we are going to live so intimately with these chemicals, eating and drinking them, taking them into the very marrow of our bones, we had better know something about their nature and their power." The main chemical that sparked this movement was dichlorodiphenyl trichloroethane, otherwise known as DDT, developed by Paul Mueller in 1939. And once it was discovered that DDT could be used as a powerful insecticide, the U.S. Army began to utilize it in Naples, Italy, to stop the typhus epidemic. It was also used to kill mosquitoes that were possible carriers of malaria in the late 1940s. DDT was a windfall that would go on to save thousands of lives. In fact, by 1959, 40,000 tons of DDT were sprayed every year in the United States, all while the long-term effects were still unknown. Today, DDT is understood to be an endocrine-disrupting chemical and a possible carcinogen that can alter neurological function and damage reproductive organs. Despite popular notion, Rachel's intention surrounding this movement was not to ban all pesticides and chemicals. She claimed, "It is not my contention that chemical insecticides must never be used. I do contend that we put poisonous and biologically potent chemicals indiscriminately into hands of persons largely and wholly ignorant of their potentials for harm. We have subjected enormous numbers of people to contact with these poisons without their consent and often without their knowledge." She became a voice for the voiceless and demanded transparency. Ms. Carson is even believed to be the individual who sparked the movement that ultimately led to the creation of the Environmental Protection Agency. On June 4th, 1963, Rachel delivered her congressional testimony before the Subcommittee on Reorganization and International Organizations of the Committee on Government Operations in Washington, D.C., in regards to the problem of environmental hazards and the control of hazardous pesticides in the United States. Rachel Carson, being an excellent writer, was also an esteemed orator who understood the art of rhetoric. During the speech, she utilized Aristotle's three rhetorical appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos, in order to provoke the appropriate strong emotional response to her compelling message. When drawing the attention of such a paramount audience, Rachel carefully crafted her words to ensure the urgency of this message did not go unnoticed. Upon entering the new Senate building that day, Rachel Carson already possessed initial ethos, which is the reputation or initial credibility someone has in regards to their personal image or branding. Ethos is crucial to any orator because it can help convince the audience that they are credible based on their character or status. Given that Rachel was already a prized author with a master's degree in zoology and backed by the President of the United States himself, she had leverage over the audience and was able to capture their attention on a much deeper level. Carson expressed, "No one fully understands, for example, what happens when pesticide residue stored in our bodies interact with drugs repeatedly taken. And there are some indicators that detergents, which are often present in our drinking water, may affect the lining of the digestive tract so that it more readily absorbs cancer-causing chemicals." By letting the audience know that not even the chemical companies fully understand the side effects of their products, Carson strikes down their credibility and gives Congress the opportunity to reconsider the science or lobbying that affected their perspectives on pesticides. Alternatively, the credibility resonates back with Carson as she displays great audacity for addressing the information or lack thereof provided by the chemical industry to the people of the United States and beyond. During an attempt to convince the audience that this detrimental problem deserves their full attention and concern, Carson deploys the second artistic proof, pathos, which relies on articulating the speech to appeal to the audience's emotions and awaken their feelings to influence their arrival to certain conclusions. She stated, "Contamination of various kinds has now invaded all of the physical environment that supports us: water, soil, air, and vegetation. It has even penetrated that internal environment within bodies of animals and of men. It comes from many sources: radioactive waste from reactors, laboratories and hospitals, fallout from nuclear explosions, domestic waste from cities and towns, chemical waste from factories, detergents from home and industries." Being descriptive by highlighting that this is man's problem too allowed Carson to remind Congress that the unrestrained use of hazardous pesticides and chemicals puts their personal lives at risk. With that being said, they are more likely to take it seriously, seeing as they are experiencing the repercussions firsthand. Through listing various sources of contamination brought forth by man, Carson evoked a feeling of pity for wildlife affected, as she profusely expresses that humankind has ignored the consequences of the excessive, careless use of pesticides and other harmful substances. Furthermore, Carson uses logos, which is the perfect rhetorical proof, seeing as it relates to reason, facts, data, proof, and logic. In her congressional testimony, Rachel states her case by saying, "The world of air and water and soil supports not only hundreds of thousands of species of animals and plants, it supports man himself. In the past, we have often chose to ignore this fact. Now we are receiving sharp reminders that our headless and destructive acts enter into vast cycles of the earth and in time return to bring hazard to ourselves." Carson wanted Congress to be fully aware of the detrimental effects of pesticides and other chemical poisons that are experienced by all who reside on Earth, insinuating the fact that this is a paramount issue that must be addressed immediately for the sake of all living organisms. By highlighting the number of species that are affected by such chemicals, it adds a sense of reality and helps the audience understand the full capacity of the affected. It also aids Rachel's credibility as it displays a true sense that the orator has done their research and arrived fully prepared to make their claim. But that's not all. Rachel Carson also used a variety of rhetorical devices to further persuade the audience towards accepting the importance of controlling the use of pesticides and other virulent chemicals. She stated, "We have acquired technical skills on a scale undreamed even a generation ago. We can do dramatic things and we can do them quickly. By the time damaging side effects are apparent, it is often too late or impossible to reverse our actions." This is known as an anaphora, a repetition of word at the beginning of a successive sentence. Rachel utilized this to emphasize or reinforce that everyone who comes in contact with chemicals such as DDT are involved for the fight for the health of themselves, the wildlife, and the environment. Reciting the personal pronoun "we" in her speech before Congress gave a number of times was a deliberate attempt to invoke a sense of collectivity and shared responsibility. Establishing common ground creates a bond with the audience that can allow them to trust easier, thus creating a bond that builds derived credibility. Another rhetorical strategy that Carson employs in congressional testimony is known as oppositio, a device where adjacent words are placed side by side with one word describing or clarifying the other. Carson states, "Contamination of various kinds has now invaded all of the physical environment that supports us: water, soil, air, and vegetation." Breaking down the physical environment into subcategories was Carson's way of highlighting the areas that may be overlooked. Congress and the public must understand the full extent of the affected in order to feel compelled enough to take action. Through the utilization of such rhetorical devices and compelling information, Rachel Carson's congressional testimony is one of the most profound events that got the public to question their reality and their safety within it. Rachel Carson is hailed as one of the most important conversationalists in history and the mother of the modern environmentalist movement for her work in educating the public on the harmful use of man-made chemicals. Her research even led to the nationwide ban of DDT, a powerful insecticide used by the agricultural industry to kill crop-eating pests. The United States ceased all use of DDT in 1972, but chemicals still persist over a long period of time in the environment and in animal tissues, according to the CDC, so the fight is not over. Although Ms. Carson may have received backlash from chemical giants and the American public during her initial years fighting for the health of the environment and of all life, her profound excellence in speech, writing, and research eventually prized her an award-winning environmentalist. In fact, 16 years after Rachel Carson tragically passed away, President Jimmy Carter awarded her the Presidential Medal of Freedom for her monumental work. Thank you for listening to my presentation on the life and times of the astounding Rachel Carson. Today, as a new generation follows in her footsteps, an abundance of gratitude is due for the woman who kick-started the environmental movement. Remember that anyone can make a difference, and as Rachel once said, those who contemplate the beauty of Earth find reserves of strength that will endure as long as life lasts. Thank you.
The essence of Rachel's message was that we had to come to terms with nature and work with it and not against it. In a complex modern society, of course, that was a very radical concept, but in the sense of a change in our thought, I think she was revolutionary.